May we bless our awakening this morning. With the dawn, nature's familiar shapes and colors emerge from the darkness to delight us afresh with their variety and beauty. With our awakening from slumber, our senses and our spirits respond anew to the splendor of the world. Reborn with the day, we take up our responsibility, renewing continually the work of creation. We embrace this morning in our care all who are sick or suffering in pain this day. May they know full and complete healing. We mourn with those who mourn. May they know peace and comfort in their grieving. We rejoice with those who rejoice in their celebrations of life. May our joy make their joy complete. Our hearts are broken wide open to the victims of war. May our brokenness lead us to act in ways of peace. As human beings, shaped in a divine image, we're called to share in the life of creation. We're each given the task of shaping the future of humanity. May our gratitude for all the beauty and order that surround us in nature impel us to service in the name of all creation. May nothing we do mar the holiness of life by causing any other creature to lose the joy of living. May all our actions bring blessing to us and to all those whose lives we touch. May we walk in the light. May we be bringers of peace. So be it. Amen. Little technical question. This, when I hit close on the iPad, it doesn't respond. Is that okay? Okay. Well, such is life. Our worship, our praying, our singing, our delight is interrupted by little glitches with the technology. And so it goes. I've been thinking about stories of awakenings that we're probably all familiar with. And as I've considered them, I've realized that most great awakenings often lead to a considerable bit of messiness as they unfold. Perhaps the original, and maybe therefore the messiest of all, perhaps the original awakening is the one that we read about at the beginning of the book of Genesis. That delightful story of Adam and Eve who simply cannot resist the temptation to have knowledge of good and evil. They eat from a forbidden tree, and as the story goes, their eyes were opened and they saw that they were naked. Much has been made of their story over the centuries, and not all of it good. The snake is bad. Adam and Eve are guilty of original sin, and on and on. And sin and punishment become the eternal condition of humankind. But what if the snake isn't bad? What if the snake is a wisdom figure? What if the snake is a symbol of the renewal of life as it reinvents itself again and again through shedding and shedding and shedding a skin that no longer fits? What if the ancient story of Adam and Eve represents the awakening of human consciousness? It's still a messy awakening, but one full of glorious, glorious possibility. The Buddha awakens under the Bodhi tree, and he rises from his seat to leave behind his wealth, his wife, his family. His awakening disrupts the lives of those closest to him. Becoming conscious and awake, is messy. Jesus awakened to his high calling to challenge the religious and political power structures of his day in the service of the poor and the hungry and the oppressed. His family thought he was crazy. He's eventually crucified. It doesn't get much messier. As a young student at Morehouse College, Martin Luther King Jr. awakened in a Connecticut tobacco field when he was first exposed to the possibility of a society in the Northeast that was at least not formally segregated. His awakening led him to leadership in the movement towards civil rights and the resistance to the Vietnam War. It also led to his death. Awakening is messy. Without exception, these great awakenings of Buddha and Jesus and Martin Luther King Jr. resulted in lives changed, disrupted, redirected, and noticeably each of these awakenings had its roots in the witnessing of the suffering of others. Each of these awakenings resulted in the transformation of a human life. Well, awakenings come in all shapes and sizes, and not all awakenings are dramatic. They may happen in quiet, secret spaces. Often, awakenings mean that something's going to change, and when changes happen, they can cause disruption and inconvenience, messiness. And the metamorphosis of the caterpillar that we saw during the prelude seems like a good metaphor for talking about awakening this morning. I was quite captured by the amount of work that it took the caterpillar to begin to form the chrysalis, or the cocoon, in which its transformation would take place. I looked up the definition of chrysalis, and I found that it is, quote, a sheltered state or a stage of being or growth. This kind of implies that something comes before the cocoon and something comes after. Last week, Rabbi Laurie spoke about the Passover story of the liberation of Israel from slavery in Egypt. I think it's a prime story about the process of awakening, of metamorphosis, of transformation. Israel existed for generations under the crushing heel of Pharaoh, as a caterpillar, if you will. Under the leadership of Moses, they left Egypt behind and entered the chrysalis, a 40-year journey of challenge and growth, 40 years of learning how to leave behind their slave mentality in preparation for the time when they would emerge from their wilderness cocoon as a people with a sense of identity and purpose as they prepared to cross the Jordan River into life as the people of God. The story of their awakening, their cocooning, their emergence as liberated people is messy and complicated from beginning to end. And here we are this morning. For the last 2 years, we have been in a COVID-induced chrysalis. We've been confined in different ways, somewhat isolated from one another, masked, socially distanced, hidden. In some ways, the life of the community has been on hold. And in all that time, some kind of transformative process has been going on in secret, hidden from view, possibly even hidden from our own eyes, in much the same way that the work of transformation from caterpillar to butterfly happens in a hidden and protective environment. So each one of us is susceptible to our own awakenings as we emerge from 2 years of reduced activity and contact with the world around us. We may have to rediscover ourselves in some ways. Perhaps we've realized that some things about our lives weren't working as well as we thought, and we may want to make some changes. We may have come to new spiritual realizations that will affect how we move forward with more care in our relationships. We may have discovered hidden strengths we didn't know we possessed. In the course of our confinement, we may have shifted our priorities and our feelings about what is important and what is not in life. Working our way out of our cocoon, we may emerge awakened to new ways of being more authentically who we're called to be. And with any of these awakenings, change becomes inevitable. And with change, there's always messiness. But the time is now to begin to work our way out of the chrysalis. As we observed in the opening video, the work is not easy. In some ways, that cocoon has been safe and comfortable. And yet, if the butterfly is going to be able to spread its wings and fly, it has to struggle to get out of the chrysalis, to assume its new identity. As we begin to emerge from COVID, we are in the process of awakening. Perhaps reawakening. We're not the same individuals or the same community that entered into the COVID cocoon 2 years ago. We have had a totally different experience of being a faith community than any of us could have imagined before COVID and the advent of all this mostly helpful technology. We've learned to live without chapel walls, as we discovered ourselves in a new way in the little square boxes on Zoom. We've learned to relate to one another a bit differently across the safety of the computer screen. Relationships have changed. Deep and meaningful conversations have happened in our Zoom cocoon. In the meanwhile, life and ministry has continued. The care coordinators have been at work week in and week out across these last 2 years. A new pastoral care team has formed to augment the work of the care coordinators. We've lost beloved friends. Babies have been born. Conversations have continued in the process of seeking a settled minister. The chrysalis has been anything but a place of rest and relaxation where nothing's going on. The chrysalis is a place of transformation, and we are on the threshold of reawakening. Next week is Easter Sunday. It's coming at us, barreling towards us quicker than we can imagine. A day that celebrates the transformation that occurs in the ongoing movement of all creation from life into death, into life again. Once again, we will go live. There'll be a congregation in the sanctuary. There'll be a congregation on Zoom. Stephen's Chapel will feel our transformed lives as we gather together again. Our emergence from the cocoon of the last 2 years will be worth celebrating, and it might be messy. We may have to rediscover one another after 2 years of hidden growth and transformation. We will have the ongoing challenges of technology as we discover how to continue to minister and worship with each other in person in the chapel and on Zoom. Easter looms on the horizon. We are in a season of resurrection and awakening as a community, as a nation, and as a world. It is messy. Transformation and awakening are strenuous processes, and we've never done it quite this way before. John O'Donohue, the Celtic poet and mystic, has written this: "We live between the act of awakening and the act of surrender. Each morning we awaken to the light and the invitation to a new day in the world of time. Each night, we surrender to the dark, to be taken to play in the world of dreams, where time is no more. At birth, we were awakened and emerged to become visible in the world. At death, we will surrender again to the dark, to become invisible. Awakening and surrender, they frame each day and each life, and between them is the journey where anything can happen, the beauty and the frailty. Our individual awakenings and our awakening together again as a faith community will demand patience. It will demand loving kindness. It will demand a sense of outrageous humor. May our awakening together be a glorious and joyful entrance into the new life that awaits our living beyond the cocoon. May we live together with laughter and compassion through whatever messiness awaits. Amen.